For,
So
for,
just,
for
Oh, sorry.
no, I'm just going to turn, you can go ahead, Doug. I'm just going to test the stream to make sure everything's working.
Cool. We'll just go through the history, introduce yourself and the winery. Then most people have either invitation, instantané, or insouciance. Everything else is sold out, so that's what they were able to get. Yeah, we'll just talk about the wines, talk about the general history, and then the wines themselves, and then we'll answer some questions, and should wrap up in about an hour, kind of thing.
Okay. Are you guys asking questions as well, or should I go straight away? I think it's always good if it's short answer or different question that just. I think sometimes long answer people get bored, but.
Yeah. Well,
this is Sheila, one of our
Hello.
Oh, her microphone.
I don't know Sheila.
No, you don't know Sheila, but Sheila is one of our. She's kind of our mentor, I guess you could say, at work. She knows everything Burgundy and everything Champagne is Sheila's repertoire.
Wow.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is, Sheila. Sheila, you're muted. Sheila, you're muted. We can't hear you.
I said I paid them both to say that.
I'm going to get off camera because I don't need to be on camera. But Francois, it was nice seeing you.
Hello.
And I'm going to get off the camera, but I'll be watching.
Is the sound okay for everyone? For me?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay.
Are we? Can you hear us? Okay, is it okay?
Yeah, it's all good for me.
Perfect. Thank you for joining us later on a Sunday. I really appreciate it.
That's all good. I hate Valentine's Day anyway, so that's perfect.
So do we.
I wonder why people keep liking it, because every time I ask some friends, everybody hates it. But
it's funny because I think I was just talking to my partner about it when we were out, and I said I think I'm a little bit jaded because of years working in restaurants, and it was always the worst night of the year to work in restaurants. Because everybody, it was like, Dougie, I don't know if you agree, but it was almost as though everybody had to go out, but didn't actually want to go out. So people were just in a bad mood the whole time.
Yeah, well, same thing here.
Yeah, so we're just talking about the general outline. We'll just go through the history, talk about the wines, answer some questions, keep them kind of short answer, and just move forward.
I mean, it's gonna be a bit of a range of people following. There'll be some customers of ours that are, very familiar with your wines and traveled to Champagne and know it well. And I think there'll be just as many people, if not more, that are very new to it as well, and excited to learn. So it was the response. I don't know if Doug told you, but the response was good. I mean, sold quite a bit, and of course, because it's Valentine's Day. All the rosé sold very fast. So.
Nice. And how many people are we expecting?
I don't know, because what we do is we do these sessions like a webinar. So we put it out to our whole database that people can watch live, but then the second it's over, we upload it to our YouTube channel as well.
Okay.
It's actually live on YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah. So people can watch it from YouTube as well, Francois, if they'd rather not use Zoom.
Oh, perfect.
So I'll have to be very. I'll have to behave.
Well, this will live on the internet forever.
Okay, so how long have you guys been in lockdown for now?
2 months.
How long has been the lockdown for you guys?
Well, if you think about it, we're in theory almost a year, but the most recent lockdown started the first week of December, I believe.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so it's been, and we're now in what we call a stay-at-home order as well. So I mean, it's they request, whether people do or not, they request that people really only leave for groceries, pharmacy. That's it. So
yeah.
But it started here. I mean, it started here in March, and then we had a bit of a window in the summer where we saw some restaurants open for patio and kind of outdoor dining, and then it kind of shut it back down in the fall. So as you can imagine, it's wreaking havoc on our friends in restaurants, which is really, really hard to watch right now.
Is it are people open for takeaways, or they just close?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's actually
no patio, but mind you, it's minus 10 degrees. So.
Yeah.
Well, what's the situation there right now? You're still curfew, correct?
It's yeah, curfew. So there is supposed to be nothing after 6 p.m.
Okay.
From 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. it's nobody outside really, except people who are working, who are night shift or whatever. No, restaurants are closed since early November. And there is no museum, no cinema, no swimming pool, no live music or whatever. Well, I think it's going to be like this until probably Easter, I guess. And then for Easter, we are hoping with the vaccine and warmer days and better energy coming from spring, we are hopefully will be possible to open more restaurants, at least outside or with 25% capacity, whatever. But yeah, well, everybody is looking at spring now.
Yeah.
We'll see anyway. We're just a little bit sick of just being following the wave. What we want to do with my brother now is just be slightly above the water, above this fucking crisis, and try to figure out the best way to get more visibility and able to be back on track, basically.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Next, probably another 2 months to go. Probably.
Do you typically travel much?
Well, I love to travel.
Would you do export travel, or is that your brother more?
No, that's me. Okay. I do all the exports, and I think that's what I was saying just before you got online. I haven't been traveling for a year, and this is probably the first time for 15 years that I haven't been taking a plane for a whole year. It
Me too.
changes a little bit.
Yeah, this is the first time. It's so strange for us to not to visit Champagne, not to be in Burgundy. It's like, we feel a bit disoriented.
a little bit. Well, there is some good points. Anyway, our vineyards last year has been just a real. We all the time, all the team, all the energy was in the vineyard. So we had an amazing season and everything was looking so perfect at the end of the year that we were like, well, this is something that we need to keep doing, because I was in the vineyard with the whole team, while most of the time are either in the winery or traveling. And we figured out with my brother that this crisis was actually a good way to understand that our first priority is to focus in the vineyard and spend all the time, all the energy, all the money there. So what we've decided is to keep that window from mid-March until mid-June or late June, just specifically for the vineyard. So no travel, no visit. We do visit for professional just 1 day a week now. Well, nobody's coming anyway because we can't travel. But that's where we want to focus, and then we will be able to travel in from August until February. But that was at least one good point of this crisis.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. All right, what time is it? 1:59. I guess we'll give it one more second. I mean, if anybody, you're all. There was one question. I think Kathleen said, can we open? Yes, please open champagne.
Sure.
Time to start sipping. So definitely open. Make yourself comfortable, and we'll get started in about a minute.
I'm just gonna get a glass, actually. Sure. What are you? Are we starting with invitation?
Invitation, yeah.
So Doug, actually, why don't we get started? Doug, do you want to do a bit of an introduction of who obviously we are and what's going on, and then we'll kind of jump into let's just get it going.
Sure. So, hi everyone. I'm Doug. I work for Halpern along with Sheila. We're being joined today by Francois Huré, coming from Champagne Huré Frères out of Lude. This is, I guess, just over a year since we met. Sat down, had a lovely afternoon, and chased all the wines, and it's been great ever since. Francois has been a huge supporter of us, and we're really happy to be working together. And we just did our first release, so you're enjoying that now. We should see another one around the same time next year. So it's been a great relationship, and we've been huge fans of the wines ever since. So we're very happy to be joined by him today on this special day for Champagne.
I suppose that was the last time you would have traveled prior to everything going on, isn't it?
Yeah, it was my last trip.
And ended it on a bang in Champagne.
Yeah, yeah, that was my first time there, and it was, I don't know, if anyone hasn't been there, I'd highly recommend visiting, and definitely visiting the winery. But places like the Glue Pot and things like that really kind of drove me there, and you want to go back every year. Yeah, it blew me away, and I don't know, I'm sure we'll get into it, but just how amazing the terroir and the landscape is, and how each region is so important, and how there's so much to learn and so much that I had no idea. And I think one of the biggest things was when you introduced us to Remy Leroy, and you're like, oh, just go on your way to Beaune, and I didn't realize how far it was. And then when we drove the 2 hours, I was like, oh, okay, Champagne is a much bigger region than I could have ever imagined, and there's a lot of great people there.
Well, let's maybe what we'll do is kind of just get started with a bit of a backstory, if you don't mind. Give a little bit of history of yourself and your family, and how you kind of came to be making wine in Lude.
Okay, so thank you for joining tonight. So I am Francois Huré, and I am working with my brother Pierre at our winery, which is called Huré Frères. Well, the history will be actually quite easy to tell, because we are considering Champagne, we are quite young, because this is my father who started the business with his two brothers back in 1970, really. So it's pretty young. So they started pretty much from scratch, and then they get more land, develop the business and the sales of wines. And I came back myself in 2005, and my brother came back in 2013. And I'm so fully in charge since 2008 now of the company. So we had to kill all the other members of the family to be really doing our business, but it's the way it goes nowadays. I'm joking, of course, but so my brother Pierre is engineer in viticulture, so he deals about all the vineyards work, and he also deals with some of the vineyards that we purchase. We do a little bit of purchasing, contract fruit, and we want to have exactly the same philosophy in those vineyards that in our vineyards. And I'm the one who has the chance to make the wine, do some Zoom meetings on a Sunday evening, and also do all the exports market of the company.
How many countries do you export to? Is it compared to what stays within France?
Well, we are all over Europe. So Europe is very easy for us anyway to travel in Europe. So all over Europe, we do, well, Canada and America, United States is our first market. And then we go Russia, East and Southeast Asia. So yeah, Japan, big market, Japan, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, and Australia. The main Champagne market, really.
So one of the things that you were saying too, in the big scheme of things, and a lot of us are familiar with a lot of the large older the houses in Champagne, but being relatively new, how hard was it, or what were the challenges when it comes to kind of accruing vineyards? And I know you own a number, but do you purchase a bit as well of fruit?
Yeah, well, the size of the winery is good enough to live with, but this is nothing really fancy. So we grow grapes on 10 hectares of grapes. So 10 hectares, I think you guys would say 25 acres, I guess.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah, right about that.
So we're roughly 25 acres, and we purchase fruit on 2 hectares and on a very specific vineyards. And well, to be honest, I never found it really hard to start a brand or to start a winery and to compare to the larger houses or to the older grower Champagne, because there is one thing that we have a very common point with my brother or with my father, and the only way we see things is just like to keep moving forward. And we are not really looking at tradition or looking at the old way or old school fashion. For us, what really drives us is how can we get better. every day, whether it's in the vineyard, in the aging of the wine, or in the winery. And being relatively young for this is actually a pretty good way to look at things.
I guess it kind of gives you a bit of a fresh perspective on it all. It's
exactly.
not kind of so rooted in time that it's like, this is the way it is, don't change anything.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we are very lucky because when I bought the company 12 years ago, or the shares of the company, literally my father gave me the keys and told me, well, I'm here anytime you want, but this is your project now, so you deal with it. Which was actually a very good trust in what we could do, but a very easy way to move quickly forward. So what has changed, we basically move all the viticulture from a classic approach to a much more organic approach in the vineyards. And we also could redefine a little bit the line of our wines. So there was a nice range of champagne, but I thought back then we could be slightly more precise and slightly more coherent with the soil that we have, with all the different wines. So that's what we've been doing over the last 10 years with my brother. And it's starting to be much more harmonious in what we want to do nowadays. Because maybe I think we could talk about where we are. Really.
So I have a map of Montagne-Huré. Should I share that? Does that help?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
sure.
Cool. Bear with me if I can. I always forget where it is. Just to kind of give us from some. Chris, I think I'm gonna have to get. You might have to have me. I don't know if I can share. Sorry, one second. All right, here we go.
All right, that's that's a good one. So our village is in Lude. So Lude is slightly, you see it very close to. Well, I can't point it, but the most interesting thing here that you can see is all this green zone that you see is called Montagne de Reims, and the very specific site of Montagne de Reims, and specifically where we are in Lude or Mailly-Champagne, this is the exposure of this. So this is a north-facing slope, and north-facing slope is not very usual to grow grapes. In the northern hemisphere anyway, most of the people are looking for south-facing slope to get more sun, more exposure. So historically, where we are, I don't know if you can point Lude.
It's just above the Ram. If you go Montagne de Ram, it's just above it. Down a bit.
Down. Anyway, it's that's really what defines us. The first thing, yes, exactly. That's where it is, where we are. So Reims, the city of Reims, is actually 15 kilometers north of where we are, of where Lude is. And this north-facing slope means always a slightly cooler climate. As an example, there is on the other side of the Montagne de Reims, very close to Épernay, there is some top villages like Ailly or Mareuil-sur-Ailly or Cumières, Épernay. All those places are south-facing. And on our side, on this north-facing slope, we usually pick a week later. And a week later, for the same variety, this is quite a big gap. So it means slightly cooler climate, and it also means a slightly higher acidity in our wines. And I think our identity is to show that nice freshness, that nice salinity on the finish of our wine. That's also who we are. The second very specific thing about Lude and the few villages around is the kind of soils that we have. And we have, of course, we are in this clay and limestone soil that all over, you can find all over Champagne. But the very specific thing about Lude is that we have some sand mixed with the clay, and up to 55% of sand. So it makes a very light, very friable, and very free draining kind of soil. So and this layer of sand and clay is roughly around 50 centimeters, between 40 to 60, depending on where we are. And then we have the limestone. And limestone is the DNA of Champagne. And this kind of soil is great to grow Pinot Meunier fruit. That's why we have in Lude a lot of Meunier planted. And we have also at our winery roughly 40% of Meunier coming into the different blends. So that's the very specific side of where we are. And if I can add, you were talking, Sheila, earlier about larger houses. And I think in Champagne, there are two big families. There are the larger houses, and everybody knows them, whether it's Paul Roger, it's Roderer, it's Veuve Clicquot, it's all those big guys. And they do a magnificent job as promoting Champagne, as communication about Champagne, as opening new markets. And the other family is more the small producer, as we are, and we could call us, grower Champagne. And I think we are not competitors. We are just different options for people who want to discover Champagne in another way or differently. And we strongly believe with my brother that our job as a grower Champagne is not that you see us as a brand, but I think you need to see us as a specific origin, as a specific or a strong identity style of Champagne. And that's what we want to do into our wines, is showing where the fruits are coming from, the specific slope, the specific exposure, the specific soils. And that's where we are every day. We spend all our time in the vineyards, and we have some very deep feelings when you're working in a specific Pinot Noir block or Chardonnay block. And we want our wines to reflect all the feelings, all the emotions, and all the specific aspects about where we are coming from. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I was wondering too, if you don't mind, I mean, I know a lot of people on the call might be familiar, but not, could you just speak a little bit to the history of, I mean, and I know it's a long history, but mainly the history of grower Champagne and how it became to be something that is so much more of a phrase we're so familiar with now versus, 15, 20, 25 years ago.
Well, it all comes from how is organized the Champagne region. So in Champagne, the land, the vineyards mostly belong to the growers. So basically, roughly 80 to 85% of the land belongs to the small growers as we are. But the business, the sales of wine is mainly done by the big guys, by the big houses for roughly 75%. And it's always been like this in Champagne. The big guys, they have always been purchasing grapes to small growers to make their wine. So some of big houses own some vineyards, but most of them have a little bit of vineyard and purchase a lot of fruit. That's how it started, which means we always need to sit around the table before harvest to set up a crop level and to also set up a price of the grapes. So everybody can live with either you grow grapes or either you sell some Champagne. That's how it started. And the big houses have always been very good in marketing Champagne, is branding Champagne, and they've been doing it for like 200 years. So they really know how to do it. And the growers were a very limited portion of the market back, before the 50s. And after the Second World War, our region has been very much damaged by this Second World War. And people who were growing grapes were definitely not making money. Most of the people back then were growing grapes, but also growing potatoes or corn or cereal just to live with. And slowly but surely, it changed a little bit, specifically since 1970, which was actually the first crop, because it was a pretty big crop overall Champagne, the first crop where the growers started to make money because there was enough grapes on the vines to either sell part of their production and maybe some for the others keep the other part and started to make more wine with it. So the first grower Champagne started between the 50s and the 70s to produce their own wines. And I think since the market for growers has been bigger between the 80s and 2000, really, 2000 vintage. And we see that nowadays, because communication is easier, when with all the social media, with internet, it's easier to communicate about new wine or new growers. We see for the last 15 years more and more growers on the market with a with a much stronger identity into their wines, more like a Burgundy approach of how we can express a specific vineyard or a specific slope or a specific variety. And that's why I think this wave of grower Champagne really started 15 years ago, and we really see it on the market now.
It's an interesting point that I never really would have considered before, that idea of social media, because I think one of the huge issues probably for so long was it's so expensive to market wines. Exactly. By the time it comes to actually getting your wines in by the glass in New York and, Tokyo, like it's to be able to afford to do that. True.
It's exactly, well, you're right. It's easier. And we also see all the sums, whether it's in New York or in Toronto or in different country. There is today the sommelier. They always want the new thing, the new guy or the new girl that comes with like a specific cuvée of 500 bottles. So,
smaller the better.
Yes, exactly. And they're happy to have it because it's fancy on the list, but it goes out so quickly that they also need a larger list. And I think that's also the big difference. I think if we talk about New York, for example, which is a crazy city for new wine, if you have a look at the list of the restaurants 15 years ago for Champagne, and nowadays it's crazy. People can get 40 Champagne, grower Champagne on the list, and they're happy with it. So it's also trendy to. I mean, all those guys see Champagne more like a Burgundy place on their list nowadays.
Well, and that's what I find so interesting too, is that much more commitment. Instead of looking at a house style, now it's looking at these specific climats and what makes something so unique within, like Doug, you mentioned at the beginning. I mean, Champagne's big, and it's being able to truly understand these villages now and what makes them unique.
Yeah, you're right. It's I think Champagne has been seen as a brand for a long time, and now that I think it's also connected to people, all this young generation of winemakers who have a better background. Most of them have been traveling, whether it's in Burgundy or Rhone Valley or Napa or Australia, New Zealand. But all the new guys, they have a bigger vision of what is the wine world today. All those guys in Champagne, and most of the people who have been traveling, they want to have a better visibility, but also they want to. It's actually funny because you travel outside of your country, and when you come back, you want to have a wine, a Champagne that is expressing exactly this very specific small spot where you are. So you see big, but you want to show small, basically. And the other aspect that is helping Champagne nowadays, it's definitely not correct to say it, but it happens. This global warming helps Champagne to produce wine with a slightly higher maturity, which means also more phenolics, more texture, more ripeness, and easier way to express our soil that were sometimes austere before. I think nowadays we have the full potential of the region.
I forget who it was, but somebody told me not too long ago that, their theory on it, that wines produced in Champagne now might be some of the greatest ever produced for the balance of, better viticulture across the board, plus the changes in climate. Would you agree with that?
Completely. And not just because I'm producing now, but
what's for sale now is the best ever.
But I think the viticulture, all the winemaking skills in Champagne have always been quite good because, for all the big brands, they have, many winemakers and they are good. So they know how to deal with big volumes and to deal very well with it. The growers, the winemaking for the growers has been definitely much better for the last 20 years. But the viticulture, as you were saying, is so much better nowadays than just 10 years ago. And that's one fact. And people really consider that Champagne is not just, as much fruit as you can or bigger crop. It's very, very different nowadays. And we are actually, sometimes it's actually fun to compare our crop to white Burgundy that are nowadays not so different, really, not so different than it used to be. And second thing is with slightly warmer temperature, we got, I think it's definitely in the texture of the wine that we see a very great response to better fruit, more clean fruit, and also deeper and stronger fillings.
I think that was one of the things that caught me off guard when I visited for the first time, was just how delicious the Vinclairs were. I always thought it was kind of a more austere wine that needed a bit of the winemaking to get things be more palatable and interesting. But all the wines I tried were fantastic, and that was probably one of the biggest take-homes I had, was just how amazingly base wine is and how great the still wines were. And then when you just add the Champagne process, how it doesn't change too much. It just expresses a really unique terroir and some really beautiful.
You were lucky enough to get some Vinclair.
Yeah.
Just sneak in.
not with you, but yeah, on the trip we tried a few, and that really caught me off guard. It was amazing to see.
It's not an easy. Vinclair is the best wine. So this is the wine before bottling, and usually, so this is white still wine, very low pH, high acid, and usually low alcohol. This is between 11 and 12% alcohol. So this is actually most of the people find it as a nightmare to try the Vinclair. But when you came last year, this was vintage 19 that we were tasting together, and vintage 19 is actually a pretty fucking good vintage. So it's that was a good one.
One of the things I also wanted to ask you about is just in particular, talking before we get off the viticulture and into the tasting of the wines, is so after, correct me if I'm wrong, but after the 50s, there was kind of a huge movement with herbicides and pesticides. Like it was quite common in the area, wasn't it? And wasn't a bit of the fallout, if I know correctly, is that a lot of the soils became depleted. So this idea now of lutte raisonnée. Could you speak to that and kind of, when we hear that term, what that means essentially for the group?
So once again, we need to have a slightly bigger vision. So after the 50s, so we're talking once again here after Second World War. And our region has been very badly hit by the First World War. So for example, the city of Reims was completely destroyed, completely. And then Second World War was occupied by the Nazis. So when we talk about the 50s, we talk about a region that is roughly dying, really. And we need to think that all the crops back in the 50s were very, very low. So bad years, bad flowering, also not a great knowledge about the science of viticulture, really. So very low crop. And then came on the market all those people who are coming from the chemical industries, saying, well, if you use fertilizer in your vineyard, you will get a bigger crop. And they were right. So for the people who were trying to use fertilizer, it was working. They were getting bigger crop, bigger leaf canopy, bigger canopy management, more leaves, and more grapes, basically. So all the people who were, wanted to be vine growers. They wanted more fruit. Just to live with it.
It probably felt like such a blessing to now have this miracle thing. Yeah.
And they're like, oh yeah, it works. So let's do it. So most of the people started to use fertilizer, and then with fertilizer comes also, it helps also all the grass to grow on, or the weed to grow on the floor. So people have to say, well, we have grapes now, but we also have too much grass on the floor, so we need to get rid of it. And all the same guys coming from the chemical industry are like, well, don't worry, guys, we have what you need. We have herbicides, and it worked. So people were using fertilizer, more crop, perfect. They were using herbicides, clean vineyard, perfect. And then the last thing, with more crop and more leaves, came the botrytis also, because there was too much humidity in the vines and not enough wind aeration. So, and was coming rotten fruit that we didn't used to see before. And the guy from the chemical industry is like, we have what you need. We have anti-botrytis spray if you need. So that's how it started, as you were saying, back in the 50s, to have people going into viticulture that was much easier than before, because this was less work and more crop. So it was paradise, basically, and then, but because people were dying before of not producing grapes. And then it was like this for 25 years, really. And people started to rethink viticulture. The pioneers were starting to rethink of a cleaner viticulture in the 80s. Really, we're talking 80s, so 40 years ago. But it took a long time, because a cleaner viticulture means more work, means more people working in the vineyards, and usually smaller crop. As an example, with my brother, when we stopped using herbicides, we had to get another tractor, get somebody always working on it. So basically, we used to spend like 3 hours a year per hectare to get rid of the grass, and we moved to 35 hours a year per hectare. So time is 12, basically. But that's where we wanted to go anyway. So it's to answer your question, to move from a very easy viticulture and very easy crop to a cleaner viticulture, and also a much more interesting in terms of identity of the fruit or identity of the wine. It's much more work. It's sometimes really pain in the ass in the season, because there is no weekends. There is when you have to go plowing, you just go. You don't, because the weather is a short window to do it. And it's basically in 10 years we have. Our crop is down to 20% on average. So this is a big drop, but that's the only way, and that we actually anyway believe in, and that's the only way that Champagne will survive in the future. Does it answer your question?
Yeah, no, perfect.
Okay.
Neil just asked in the chat, and I thought it was an interesting time maybe to jump in with that, is why no houses, why we see so few still wines from Champagne?
I don't see still wines like Coteau Champenois, for example.
Yeah.
Because we are still a very pretty cold region, and we basically see more and more Coteau Champenois, like still white wine or red wine from Champagne on the markets. But this is still a very small proportion. I think it will change in the next 10 years, because most of the people nowadays, with these warmer years, we can get much riper grapes. As an example, 2020, last vintage, we started to harvest on the 24th of August ourselves, so which is super early. But we could leave some grapes much longer than before, because in September we still have a great, usually very dry and warm September. So we can leave the fruits much longer on the vine than we could do back in the 80s or in the 90s. So we will see very soon on the market more still wine. But I think we are still not completely accurate in the viticulture to produce amazing still wine from Champagne. I mean, I'm a big fan of Burgundy, and I know that you guys at Halpern have a pretty amazing selection of Burgundy wines. When I want to drink an amazing Pinot Noir, I go in Burgundy so far. I don't go in Champagne. It will probably change, but this is still a little early.
I think it almost ties into the conversation we had with Pierre the other day about how the price of Burgundy is just getting so high, and Coteau Champenois is kind of starting to find a good place, because before the price is quite high, like it usually ends up around $70 or $80 here. And so I think what Bourgogne now is about $70. So it's a good opportunity to kind of, I think as over time, it'll be more accessible and more interesting as the wines also get more riper and more available.
Yeah, but so this is still very, very small volumes. You know, I think Coteau Champenois in Champagne nowadays is max 2% of the production of the volume.
Yeah.
There is a space to improve.
I feel like I could ask you about 1.5 million questions about viticulture, but we should probably get into talking about some wines.
Yeah, I'm so thirsty.
And mainly I'm super thirsty, and I'm like, so where should we start? So on the call, Doug, I don't know, do you want to maybe just say, I think there's a bit of a range of what people are drinking today. What do we have? Insouciance, Invitation. There's a bit of memoir out there, I believe. Anything else?
Instantané as well was still available.
Yeah, so I figured if it's okay with you, is maybe kind of speak to the wines and just kind of we can go through them a little bit, so that whatever we're all drinking at home, and kind of a nice overview.
So we are on the same page. I think we need to start with this. Okay, can you see it? Yeah, Invitation.
Yeah.
So that would be a good start. So Invitation is our signature style champagne. I mean, this is a blend of all the different vineyards that we have, and I like when I make it to respect the proportion of each variety in the bottle as it is planted in the vineyard. So this is like the postcard of the vineyards. And I don't really like to talk numbers, but I will anyway. So this is 40% Meunier, as I was explaining, 40% Pinot Noir, and 20% Chardonnay. And this is what we have planted on our home vineyards. If just to conclude with numbers, Invitation is a non-vintage, but I prefer to call it like a multi-vintage, because there is always one main year, and the base year, I think this is, are you guys having 16 or 15 right now?
What would have been the first one you sent? Maybe 16?
This should be 16, I guess.
Yeah.
So the base wine is 16, and then we have some reserve wine coming from the previous vintages. And what probably the most important thing about Invitation is, beside the fact that you can drink as much as you can, but this is normal. Invitation has to be a wine that is accessible, and accessible doesn't mean simple. Accessible means whether you're a professional, a sommelier, or distributor, or somebody who just likes champagne, I want you to understand the wine and to drink it easily with a great pleasure. That's what it means. It's all about pleasure, and it just shows perfectly this north-facing side. It shows the richness of the black grapes of Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier, but also this great fresh finish that we have on Invitation, coming from our cool climate region. And Invitation is the one, you drink it, you don't think about it, and you ask for another glass. That's what we try to do.
That's always perfect when you realize the bottle's empty and you're like, what just happened?
Yeah, a good bottle is an empty bottle. You're right. That's true.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I had to go for the Magnum.
You get the bill in the restaurant and you're like, we drank 3. So in terms of, we always get a couple of questions too. I know Alfio asked in the chat, and we'll go through in terms of, is this kind of aperitif? Is this things that you pair? Is it, when and how should we drink this?
Well, I usually start for breakfast and follow up at the brunch if needed. But I think Invitation is definitely the starter. The like aperitif style. You whether you're at your place or celebration or restaurants, that has to be a very easy drinking, charming, sharp kind of wine. And for me, aperitif is the best option for Invitation.
Where should we move to next?
Do we have Insouciance, the rosé?
Yep.
Yep.
I think that's the one that the most people on the call have. So.
All right, the rosé is this one. So just to make sure, this is not a virus on the label. This is the real label of this wine. We were sorry. So rosé. There are 2 options to produce rosé in Champagne. Either we go what we call the blended style rosé. And blended style means I can just before bottling, we can blend some red wine that we've been making from our old vines and the white base. We blend the two together and have the rosé color and the rosé texture that we like. And that's what most of the people do in Champagne, and that's what I do, because I like how we can be very precise and very specific in the blend style. The other option is what we call rosé de saignée. And rosé de saignée is just a short maceration of the Pinot Noir or the Meunier for a few hours or just a few days, just to extract the pink color and then do a champagne winemaking following. And rosé de saignée is a much shorter proportion of what is produced in Champagne. I go blend once again because I can be very specific and precise. And in this rosé Insouciance, I usually like to use slightly more Chardonnay in it, just to have a nice, great energy in the wine. So roughly 30% of Chardonnay, 40% of Pinot Noir, and 30% of Meunier. And within the 40% of Pinot Noir, I have 4 to 5% of red wine. So this is a very small proportion of red wine. But I like rosé. I like when this is very delicate. I like when this is slightly uplifted. And I like when there is a great salinity on the finish of the rosé. Basically, rosé has to make me dancing. And I'm the worst dancer ever. But rosé, because sometimes we meet people who thinks rosé is sweet. Not at all. We don't like sweet champagne at our place. So this is actually slightly drier than Invitation, but it has to be with a great energy and a great focus in our rosé. And the last thing about it, I didn't tell about Invitation, but Invitation is a wine that always stays at least 3 years in our cellar between bottling and release, while the rosé stays maximum 20 months, 22 months max. So it's shorter aging in our cellar.
And I guess the pairing would be a charcuterie board from the glue pot, the smaller one, not the big one. And me and Chris got the big one, and we were not in a good place at the end of it. I didn't realize how big that was.
If when we will be able to travel in 12 years, if you guys go to Reims, like Doug was talking about Glupat is a dreaming place. You always know when you get in, but you never know when you get out. That's one of the major problems. But this is a great place. Amazing wine list, super affordable, and the food is actually quite how can I say it? It's not simple, but it's everyday easy bistro kind of food, but good music, great wine list, and very dangerous place.
I always love, I mean, that's one of my favorite type of places in the world too, are always the spots that have these wonderful wine lists, and the food is there more as, kind of a conduit for the wine.
Exactly.
Really to just not overtake, but to kind of, build them up a bit.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's been a hard thing to explain to my former chef friends. They still don't understand that, but we're working on it. But I guess we could get into the vintage wine. So Inattendu and Instantané as well. We could touch on both.
So I have. People have Inattendu with you here, or?
It was available, so some might still have it in their cellar, but it's sold out at the moment.
Okay, so we start with Inattendu. I don't have it here, but Inattendu first means unexpected. And Inattendu is a pure Chardonnay, so Blanc de Blanc champagne. And we are not a region with a lot of Chardonnay planted. That's why we call it unexpected. So this is a blend of two vineyards, one in Lude, so where we are, on this sandy and clayish soil that brings a very creamy, very generous and charming texture. And the other vineyard comes from Rilly-la-Montagne, which is just like 2K west from where we are. And Rilly-la-Montagne is a pure limestone kind of vineyard. So it brings this great, very nice bitterness, very sharp and very clean kind of flavors. And I think those two vineyards together really helps to express the identity of the Montagne de Reims and its north-facing slope. This is, I guess you guys are having vintage 2015 right now. 15 was a warm vintage. Dosage would be around 3 grams for Inattendu. And once again, most of the people, when we talk about Blanc de Blanc, they think about Côte des Blancs in Champagne. I'm sure you know where Côte des Blancs is, Sheila, but this is slightly more south of where we are. And we don't want to make a Côte des Blancs champagne. We cannot make a Côte des Blancs champagne. We want to make a champagne made out of Chardonnay that represents this generous approach of Montagne de Reims in our property.
Was Montagne de Reims always predominantly planted towards reds? Like, did that change over time, or like, is it kind of the way it's always been?
It's always been planted with Pinot Noir and Meunier mainly. Okay. Just because two reasons. First reason, the soils, there is always more clay and more sand in the Montagne de Reims, while the Chardonnay we find in Côte des Blancs is on a pure chalk, pure limestone. And the other reason, we are in a very spring frost zone in the Montagne de Reims. We can get very low temperature, until early May. Well, nothing compared to you guys, I guess, but enough to freeze the buds if it's already bud break. And the Pinot Noir and specifically Pinot Meunier are what we call the late bud birth variety. So they usually bud break is a week after Chardonnay, and sometimes a week is enough to protect the crop from the frost.
Perfect. I think for pairing as well, for Alfio's question, we could look at considering more butter-based things, so like lobster or chicken or anything else you'd recommend, Francois?
With the Inattendu?
Yeah.
Well, I like inattendu. Well, I haven't been eating a great lobster recently, but I wouldn't mind. But but I like scallops. Works very well. And there is one tricky thing that we did a few years ago. We actually do like champagne a lot with cheese, and specifically dry cheese. I think you might call it cheddar, or but for example, a great pairing with inattendu is the Comté, cheese coming from the Jura region, because it's dry, not too fat, and there is some very nice connection with the wine.
Perfect.
That
Awesome.
sounds very good. I'm going to start salivating. All right, where should we go? Memoir? Did I miss that?
Instantané, maybe.
Oh, sorry, instantané. Yeah.
Instantané. So I don't know. You guys are having 12, maybe vintage 12.
Let me check.
Because this is this kind of label. We don't have 12 anymore, so this is 13 that we have now.
Yeah, vintage 12 for us.
Okay. So that's instantané is for us a vintage, and you need to understand that in Champagne, most of the people will explain you that they make vintage wine just in very good years. I disagree. I think a vintage wine is a wine that is supposed to be the snapshot of the year. This is a wine that reflects the spirit and the quality of the year. And this is my job and I think every single year has a story to tell. And this is my job as the winemaker to do a nice selection in the winery of the wine that reflects the vintage at its best. And so it's like rewriting a new story every year, but we do like it. And instantané is also what we call the blanc de noir. So this is just made out of Pinot Noir, 80%, and Pinot Meunier, 20%. And we have to think about this wine looking at also the previous one, which was Inattendu. So Inattendu shows the Montagne de Reims with just Chardonnay, and Instantané shows the Montagne de Reims with just black grapes, black fruit, black variety. So this is vintage 12. 12 was actually a really good vintage, very challenging in the season, in the viticulture, because we get a lot of rain and a lot of downy mildew during the season. So very low crop, but what was left was good, at least. Yeah. And I think if I had two words to describe 12, this is great texture and great energy in wines. Usually, instantané always stays longer on the sediment. So this is usually 6-7 years of aging before disgorging, just because that's what this wine needs to be, in a good shape, to be in a good balance, and show all what it needs to be, what it needs to be shown.
Would you say this could also benefit, once it arrives here in Ontario, would you say that this could benefit from a bit of time in cellars here as well? Or is it usually starting to be ready kind of to drink by export?
Well, most of the time for instantané, we try to keep it 6-7 years. And there is another window of 3 years where the wine will get basically on its perfect shape, really showing everything. Some vintages, I guess 12 is one of them, can last longer. But most of the time, I would recommend our customer to drink instantané within 2 or 3 years.
I'm sure that won't be an issue. That's going to be hard to not do.
Well, 12 is gone anyway.
Yeah, champagne has a way of disappearing around my house. I'm not really sure why or how, but.
Yeah, well, same thing than Barolo. You get it, you drink it, it's all gone.
It's the weirdest thing. We bring it in and poof.
You're doing a bit of work in Barolo as well, right? There's a lot of crossover between the two regions, or is that?
Well, I don't think there is enough crossover because I'm always missing some wines, but but I think we talked about it when you came. But what I like about Nebbiolo variety is there is always this great acidity on the finish, even if it's grown on a very warm climate. And I think Nebbiolo, like Pinot Noir in Burgundy, is a variety that really translates the soil, the slope, and the exposure. For me, this is very similar. And I think we can also compare it in terms of white to Chenin, Chenin variety in the Loire Valley. For me, it's the same kind of explanation of the soil and of the origin.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great. That's
we would definitely say I'm like, Champagne and Piedmont. Those are my desert island. So.
Yeah. That's good to me.
So I guess we'll talk about memoir as well. I have a bottle here, and if we could touch on the design as well, the artist for the labels, because I thought that was really interesting as well.
So so memoir is a bit of another story. Memoir is actually what we call a solera or perpetual reserve of our reserve wine. So I don't know if everybody is aware about what is reserve wine, but reserve wine in Champagne is all the wines that we keep as a still wine in tank or in barrels, but coming from the previous vintages. And most of the time we use our reserve wine for non-vintage Champagne. We have the chance at our winery that my father started to keep the reserve wine for the first year in 1982. And since then, instead of keeping every single vintage separately, we decided to blend all the reserve wine together. And after a few years, we started to take some of it to blend it to some wines and keep the other parts. And that's what we call solera or perpetual reserve. And so memoir is actually a solera that has every single vintage between 1982 and 2015, I guess, in your in what you have. So we moved to 16, but it means this is a blend of 33 years together. This is aged not in tank, but in very big barrels, in oak cask. And I wanted to release this wine because I think nowadays, most of the people that we see at our winery or that we see in different tastings or different trips, people tend to judge what we do too quickly. People, they drink your non-vintage or they drink a vintage wine or a single vineyard wine, and they say, well, they put you in a specific box. And I don't really like this kind of approach because making wine is a life commitment. And sometimes you make great vintage, sometimes a year can be difficult, and sometimes as a winemaker, you can be in a specific mood or miss something. And I think having a vision on 33 years is actually a much better explanation of what we do, of where we are coming from, of where we are going. And it gives you guys a way to understand who we are and what we do, really. That's why I decided to do that specific bottle. And memoir was for us a perfect name for it. So this is a very tiny production because this is 2,500 bottles a year. And you were mentioning the label just before. The label is actually what we call the Moebius stripes, which is the infinite circle. It never ends. And if I do my job well, this perpetual reserve should never stop. We keep growing, and yeah, that's larger vision of what we do. Anyway.
It's an incredible wine because it's, there's so much purity of fruit. It's so precise, but there is the kind of this incredible kind of power to it and this force to it. It's, to me, it's kind of the best of both.
Thank you. This is actually a wine. That's the one we love to play gastronomic matching with, because it goes. I have the chance to have my wife, who is a world champion of risotto, well, I believe anyway. and you can pair memoir with truffle risotto and parmesan works super well. You can match memoir with what we call it veal. So maybe it's calf for you guys, or veal. Yeah, so veal. Yeah, veal works super well. So there is a lot of pairing possible, because as you were saying, this wine is still very vibrant, but has a very, very good length and great texture.
Yeah, this is one of the ones when we tried it, really, I don't know, it was amazing. It blew me away, and I think it's a perfect way of describing it. It just sums up everything you do, and it's it's amazing.
Cool.
It is definitely making me crave travel for sure. It's, we can't wait to be able to get back and to taste through everything. It's been so bizarre but interesting at the same point. I mean, obviously this year we've shifted to what we do is, virtual tastings and being able to catch up with people and have these conversations, and it's amazing, but we definitely still miss, all the smells and the tastes and flavors, and actually being able to, to be out there. So
I can imagine. Well, doors are open, anytime.
Yeah, as soon as we can, we definitely will be. Any more questions before we're almost at the hour mark, and I really appreciate you joining us in the evening. So I think we've got most of the questions, but if anybody has any last remarks or thoughts or questions, you're more than welcome to drop them in the chat before we finish up. We will definitely look so forward to hosting you here when the day comes.
Well, as soon as possible. We like to do the Zoom meetings and all this virtual testing, but I think we are much better when we physically see people. And I believe that we will get back to physical contact, and we will definitely be there. I can't wait.
And we will definitely drink some champagne and some Piedmont too.
As much as we can.
We're running a Piedmontese series as well. So this whole week has been a lot of conversation about both of those things, which is great. And it's interesting because being able to talk, I really appreciate your time, because it really keeps us on our toes as well. I mean, for us, one of the things is always being able to kind of keep our education up as the importers. And, it definitely means a lot to us to be able to kind of hone our skills and ask some questions as well.
Heidi and Michael Sharp say hi as well. It looks like they visited you and your brother 7.5 years ago.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, we would be happy to see them again. No worries.
Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you everybody so much for taking the time to join us. We really appreciate it. There's no better way to actually enjoy Sunday than drinking some afternoon champagne. So
yeah.
It's actually tomorrow's a bank holiday here. We all have the day off, so we get to enjoy it a little bit more, I think.
All right, nice. Go for it. Well, thank you for organizing it. Thank you, Doug and Sheila. And definitely can't wait to be with you guys. Keep up the good work, and if I can do anything, just ask for it.
And we will, just so everybody knows as well, we upload every time we do these crew Classe sessions, we upload it on our YouTube video as well, or YouTube channel as well. So that'll be on there. And then every time we do these sessions, we're always trying to kind of build up our YouTube page. If you're interested in wine, if you want to see some different conversations with fabulous winemakers from around the world, it's a great option there. There's lots of neat ones. So this will be on there this afternoon as well. So thank you all very much, and we'll definitely be at some more sessions soon. So keep an eye open for our e-blasts, and we'll